happen. Okay, greetings everyone. My name is Iryna Manukovska and this is Make Your Innovation Work. And today I host Evans, and she's going to guide us through networking issues. And actually, the thing I love about Jane in her approach, that networking can be a system. So it means that you can manage it. And for me, as a 100% introvert, it's extremely important. So Jane, can you please introduce yourself, how you started this networking business professional? What are your relations with networking?
Perfect. Thank you. And I'm so happy to be here and to share, I suppose, some of my thoughts on what I have learned in my few short years on the planet. So my background, to give a sort of a synopsis, and there's a reason why I sort of shared the background. So I used to work in a very extroverted industry in tourism, and my background is corporate. I did an awful lot of traveling. I was doing an awful lot of exhibitions. I ran the convention bureau in Dublin for a number of years, and I became then, I was a professional conference organizer for 10 years. So traveling around the world, pitching for conferences, association conferences to come to Ireland. And so there was an awful lot of networking, going to exhibitions and what have you. But I struggled, and I knew I found it hard. I felt less than, but I didn't know why I felt why it was so hard and why I felt less than. And in the end of 2017, I got made redundant, and my life changed. It's every woman's dream. Like, I was breastfeeding my third child, had two other toddlers walking around, and then they said, "You've no money, no job," and I was going, "That's epic, thank you." Saying that to an emotional, very, very tired woman, it's just thank you. So that sent me on a trajectory of going into the world of SMEs, so into small, medium business. And I realized when I stepped out of the tourism bubble, let's put it, or business tourism bubble, that I didn't know anybody. And I was working in a business that does manage print, it's my partner's business. And I thought, I don't know anybody who needs a printer or technology or anything like that. So I was having to learn a new industry, and then realizing I don't know anybody. So I joined chambers and different networking groups. I did that. I was pretty appalling at it, because I realized then that I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't understand how to do it, how to approach it. And then it was years later that I realized nobody really talks a lot about this or teaches people. And I thought, well, you know what? This has been a real struggle for me, but I've learned an awful lot. So I would like to be able to share this with other people. So I had a realization that about 3 years ago, that having learned to network, I had grown my self-awareness and my confidence exponentially. Now, in corporate, if you looked on paper, it looked like I had a very good gradient in terms of trajectory of my career, in terms of success and promotions and everything I've done. But as a human, that didn't feel that was the case. I really felt less than. So what I realized, that learning to network had made me far more confident, and why it had made me far more confident is I really had to understand, who am I? Who am I when I walk through the door? What's the value I bring to the table? What's the impact? And I'm still on that journey of answering all of those questions. But I became more self-aware. I had to understand what's my voice? What are my opinions? What do I want to share with the world? And it was this whole journey that I realized I was far more comfortable in my own skin. And I attribute all of that from learning how to network, because I had to connect with people. I had to share, learn to be vulnerable, step into vulnerability, step into my power, understand what I bring to the table unapologetically. And it was just all of these things that suddenly made me shift how I looked at life, and made me reframe how I do things in my relationships. And in corporate, I would have been known as the ice maiden, because I would not have let people in. I didn't know how to let people in. I didn't know I had permission to let people in. I didn't know I had permission to set boundaries. I did not know I had permission to show up as me. And so at the most basic level, for me, networking helps you grow your confidence. And what I've learned through life is that when you grow your confidence, you can achieve anything, because that's when you start to tap in and unleash your own potential. But until you learn how to grow your confidence, the other thing doesn't happen. And confidence, what I try to explain to people is confidence is a skill. It is something that we learn and we work on every single day. And every time we reach a goal, then there should be another goal. And then we might think, oh, self-doubt goes in, can I do this? Am I able to do this? But if we've got a track record of achieving and doing and accomplishing things, then the more faith we have in ourselves, the more we know, yeah, I'm not sure how to do this today, but I know I can get there because I've got this really good track record of making things happen. But for me, networking becomes incredibly important. And as I said, I was a conference organizer, so going to events, conferences, what I did, I went to conferences for conference organizers. But what I would say is that when it doesn't matter how expert or how accomplished people are, and this is definitely a conflation of where people make mistakes, or I'm not sure how to talk about networking. When you go into a room, it does not matter how intelligent you are. It does not matter how technically competent you are. When you walk into a room, it is about your humanity. Who are you? How do you show up? Do you know how you show up? What do you want people to understand about you? What message do you want to convey? And what value are you going to bring to the table? And that is not about the technical expertise, because networking it's extremely nuanced. And what I would say to everybody is that when you go out there, it's realizing that you have to run your race. You can only run your race, but you have to understand what that race is. And then you have to do it unapologetically. You have to go and put one foot in front of the other and start working out what matters to you. How are you going to show up? Because your networking journey will be personal to you, just as Iryna's is to her, just as it was and is to me. It is intensely personal. It's about how I show up authentically. And authenticity is a word that is used an awful lot, but I don't have a better word for it. But showing up authentically, showing up as who you are, giving yourself permission to do so, being compassionate with yourself when you're learning. Because here's the thing, networking is a skill, confidence is a skill. Nobody was born confident. Nobody was born knowing how to network. Anybody who knows how to network and anybody who is confident has learned it. We're not supposed to know it before we know it.
Couple of thoughts here. Actually, a lot of wisdom about what you're telling. So I like the idea that with communication and interactions with other people, when you're presenting some ideas, when you're bringing something to the table, you become more aware about what you like, what is like, what you believe in. I mean, in terms of business or personal or whatever. So you start to, with these mirrors, you start to understand who you are, what kind of like business, non-business value can you bring, how you can achieve your goals, and this make you like more human and more full. I mean, and more genuine. Because when you network a lot, when you communicate with people a lot, it's very hard to pretend. I mean, you can't wear this mask all over the time. So that's why you become like more and more true to yourself. And it's first thought. And here we jump into our first question. So a lot of people, they think that networking is a part of marketing, sales, business development, and all of this. But today I see, while working with engineers, with founders, it's not only about marketing and sales. It's about like ability to actually the network, to communicate to other people, transfer your idea, to find the right people on board. So on your experience and like your clients, people who you're presenting on conference or you teach, so who are they, and what is their intention to learn the working skill? How they jump into this journey?
So so the first thing around the sales and marketing, the first response I would have to that is networking is your sales and marketing time if you're doing it correctly. And that requires structure, planning, thought, effort. And the ability to network requires intention. What is your intention? And it requires attention. What attention are you putting on it? So it is definitely the sales and marketing, because I will come across an awful lot of people who will say, well, you know, if I'm setting up a business or I'm very, very busy and I have to do my sales, I have to do my marketing, I have to do this, that, and the other, and then I have to do networking. And I'm reframing that going, no, if you're doing it properly, it is your sales and marketing time, because you are educating people about what you do and who you are. You are building let me preface one point is you are building an army of supporters, because a lot of people, when they start networking, and for the uninitiated, as I was many years ago, is it's this thing, I have to go out and sell. It is about business development. I have to go out and sell a product or service or whatever it is. And what I would say to that is that puts an awful lot of pressure on people. It puts an awful lot of pressure on people when they feel icky. They don't like being in that space. So what I would say to them is take that weight away and just think of networking as it is not it's not sales time. You do not go into a network and sell, but what you do is you go in to build relationships with people. You go in to make connections. Because as you talked about there, Iryna, around sort of stakeholder management, if you're an engineer and you're going in, you might want to set up a joint venture, you might want to get access to a project, you might need more support, you might need to troubleshoot, but you cannot go and ask for support if you've not built up your network of trusted contacts. So it's about building what I call the army of supporters. So if you have educated people, and the thing about networking, it has to be consistent and it has to be incremental. When you educate people incrementally about what you do and who you are, what you're about, not just what you do, and this is a mistake a lot of people make, that they think it's just about what they do. And I'm going, I can't refer somebody in whatever, whether it was an engineer, a website designer, a solicitor, accountant, whatever, just on the basis that they are a solicitor, an accountant, engineer. That's not what it's about. What I need to know, who are you? Why do you do what you do? What does success look like? If I make an introduction or I connect you with somebody, are you a good representation of me? Do our values align? And what I've learned is when you try to do the connection bit too quickly, not understanding all of these soft elements and this nuance, then you will make mistakes. You will make bad introductions. You will get bad introductions because you're not stepping into your values and what you're all about. So it's really important to watch people, to understand, to build those relationships before you start making things happen. But they would say that you can't drink from a well that is empty. So the whole point of building your network is you build it before you need it. And another thing that I would find an awful lot of people that would say to me, I'm too busy to network because I've loads of other things to do. But most people are busy being busy, and people who are busy being busy are generally afraid of something. And I would say, find out what that is and do something about it. Go and get a mentor, go and talk to a coach, find out and understand where the fear is, because there's some blockage and obstacle there. But when you step into that power to go networking, to allow yourself to go on that journey, it is empowering. And what I've learned as well is that, when the more you find out about your values, who you are, what you're about, build up those relationships, the freedom that comes with it, the liberation, it is such a weight off when you start understanding how you show up unapologetically.
And I think it's about like long-term planning, long-term investment, not some kind of quick win. Because a lot of people, when they're going to a networking event, especially when we're talking about, startups versus investors, they picture it, okay, I will find an investor, I will make a perfect pitch, and they will give me a check. But it's much more complicated. It's about like building really some kind of like trust foundation for what you're doing, your representation in the industry or some kind of community. And next step, in a couple of weeks, months, or years, depending on the industry and issue, you can start to benefit from this networking opportunities you may expect. But it's not about quick wins like a lot of people think.
It's not. Networking is a long-term game. And what I would often say when I'm speaking in organizations and companies is, or for business owners, chambers, wherever people are, if you're going to have a career or a business or whatever for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, whatever that looks like, then you need to be thinking about networking 10, 20, 30 years. Different networks will serve people at different stages and wherever they are in their stage of evolution in business, career, profession, whatever that looks like. But it has to be a part of the journey. And if people are so busy being busy behind the laptop, they never understand what their own potential is. I think if you're a business owner, if you're a startup, it's like anything in life, you don't know what you don't know. But you won't know if you stay behind your computer and you're just behind the laptop. Things happen. There's an energy. and a vibrancy that comes when people start getting out, when they need to troubleshoot. And one of, there's so many, I could talk for days on the benefits of networking, but when you don't know what you don't know, and you go into a network and people start asking you questions, you will start to refine what are the questions, who are the people who could help me answer these questions. And here's a really, really important piece of information. Not one of us, and I will say this as somebody who used to be the queen of imposter syndrome when I was in corporate, because I was afraid to say what I didn't know. You're not supposed to know everything. You do not need to know everything. But you do have to have the right relationships. When you have a question, you know who to go to help you troubleshoot, soundboard, give you support and assistance to get answers. And your strength and your power is in the strength of the networks and relationships that you have built up, that people know about you, you know about them. So when people go out networking, what I usually say is put on your curious hat. Find out about people, get curious. What got them to where they are today? Why are they doing what they're doing? What does success look like? Start being curious. And an awful lot of people will start thinking, I'm not that interesting. I'm not really sure what to say. And especially for introverts, this is a really, really crucial thing. Focus on being interested in the other person rather than working out how interesting you are. Because when you start that conversation, you get out of your own head and you're into the head of the other person, trying to understand what makes them tick. It's really important to work out and be listening with the lens of how can I help this person? I'm not really sure. All of this information that I'm getting, we're having these conversations, I'm not really sure how it's going to be useful, but I'm going to work out how I can help this person because I really like them and I would like to see them succeed. So it's all about how we reframe. So for me, it's having that growth mindset, an open mindset, being compassionate with ourselves to allow ourselves to learn. And if somebody's, as I said earlier, if somebody's really good at networking, maybe organize a meeting or a coffee with them and say, hey, I'm starting. You seem to be really good at this. Would you give me some tips? I'd love to get a little bit of advice, because nobody gets to their chapter 10 without having started at 1, 2, 3, and so on. So if you're starting networking, be patient, be compassionate, but persevere. There's not one person in life who is successful in any walk of life, personally or professionally, if they haven't persevered at it. And I often think, as parents, it's all the stuff that we would tell our kids, get back on the bike, get back on the horse, try again. But as adults, then we get crippled and paralyzed with fear. We talk about these things to our kids, but then we don't think, well, maybe I should do the same thing. So what I would love to say to people is, don't worry if it didn't go right, or people didn't understand, or it felt a bit yucky the first time. Keep going, look back and say, right, what could I do to improve? That wasn't a failure. You're only a failure if you stop. But if I were to look and say, right, what can I do differently next time? One of the things we were talking about before we became live here, we're talking about the structure around networking, and I think this is particularly important for introverts. So I will preface this by saying as well that I'm naturally shy. I am an introvert, and while I can talk about networking till the cows come home, it's because I've lived it, breathed it, have all of the t-shirts with all of the holes, and it's my ability to help other people. And what I would suggest for introverts is it's extremely important to understand where you fit on the spectrum. And people will come back and say, well, there's also ambiverts. There absolutely are. People will see me when I'm out networking, if I'm at events or conferences, think, well, you come across as an extrovert. So I'm what you would call a situational extrovert, because I can switch it on when I need to. It's just not my natural default, and it's exhausting. That's the bit that people don't see. But there is also a performance pressure there, that people have this expectation. So what I would say in terms of introverts is, I would always advise, put your stuff in the diary as early as possible. Have a white space in your diary before you go to an event or a meeting, because you need to conserve your energy. You're going to use your energy when you're at the networking meeting. And I love networking. I enjoy it. I love meeting people and finding out, right, how can I help some of these people? I like meeting new people. I like new people coming into my world. But afterwards, then it's having that white space in my diary again, where nothing is planned, no meetings, no conversations. It's time to process and recalibrate and recharge my batteries. And that is extremely important. If you go from a high pressure, high energy, intensive meeting or conversation straight into networking, your energy is going to be depleted and you just won't show up in the best light possible. So that's something that I think is really, really important. I think in terms of most people, regardless of whether they're introverts or extroverts, tend to put a networking meeting into the diary, and that is the sum total of the preparation. Whereas I would reflip that and say to people, I would say 60% of your success in networking is how you prepare in advance. And putting a note in the diary to say I'm going to this networking event is only, you're ticking a box there. But the preparation is your mindset. It is.
And how we should prepare?
Well, it depends. I think
how we should prepare to work in.
I think the answer to that really depends on how confident you feel around networking or how experienced you are. But certainly, you know, just even from the top of my head, it'd be how you plan your diary, how you look at your energy before you go to the networking event, because, you know, life happens. You know, I've got young kids, so there can be things happening, and I've one who's homesick today, and that was a bit of a curveball today, and life happens. So with the best will in the world, we can have all of these plans, but it really is looking at, where is my energy? If your energy is a bit lower, what are the triggers and what can you do to raise your energy? So for me, it might be having music blaring in the car, or a really nice podcast, or maybe going for a walk for 10 minutes, something that's going to give me energy and raise my vibration, because I know that's also going to have an impact on how people perceive me. So I think that's really important, as well as looking at that whole energy thing. If you're new to networking, what I would also say is have some questions prepared. Focus on asking questions of other people, because two things happen. One, you're learning about the person. But two, you're conserving your energy as well, so that you can manage it. You know, because anything like this, networking, confidence, energy, all of these are muscles. So the more you use it, the better you become. But certainly when you're starting, it's about just having that bit of preparation done, preparing what you want to say, you know, so it doesn't have to be very, very, you know, polished, crafted elevator pitch. But if you were to go to an event and you had 10 seconds to introduce yourself, and you say, my name is, this is my business, and this is what I do, what would that be? What would you be saying to somebody? Because unless you have thought that out, unless you have planned that, two things will happen. One, you will waffle. Or two, you will say something and nobody will understand what you're talking about. So you actually need to plan it out and say, this is what I would like to say.
I use notes on my iPhone, so I have a couple of introductions I crafted for conference, depending on like which kind of type of networking I'm going to. It's like more official, less official, with some kind of personal details. For example, I like Lego or something, you know, to start the discussion or to sparkle the discussion. And it really works, because I get frustrated. Oh my God, I need to say something smart. And when I have a note and I know it works, I just read in it. It doesn't mean that I quote it like 100%, but use the same structure, and gives me confidence and, you know, this not elegancy, but you feel a little bit like more relaxed when you're presenting yourself than when you're thinking, oh my God, I need to say something.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole thing. The more you prepare these things, the more relaxed you feel. The more relaxed you feel, people sense that, and people, you know. And I think, yeah, when you have that prepared, I actually have two videos. I do video tips every Tuesday, and I've got one that'll come out in a couple of weeks. Two that I just do a little sort of micro learning piece around elevator pitches. And one of them, I talk about 3 words, because sometimes doing the elevator pitch for people, they can learn it off by heart, but then if it doesn't come out, then they feel, oh, I didn't make a good impression there, that didn't work out. So even when you're starting, one of my suggestions is, think of 3 words that describe what you bring to the table. And if you can remember those 3 words, what is the value, what is the impact that you bring to what audience? Have, say, 3 words, for example, because even if you can remember them, you'll be able to craft a statement in the moment, and that's very fluid and fresh. So it mightn't come out the same way every time, that doesn't matter, but if the key points are there, I think that can be a step forward to making it a little bit more professional. I think also particularly for for introverts as well. A lot of people, when I think, okay, so there's two things. Introverts tend to get intimidated by extroverts, and they have this myth or that I would like to demystify, and that they think that that extroverts are the best networkers, and I would absolutely say absolutely not. The best networkers are introverts. Just most introverts don't know that networking can be one of their highlights. And networking for an introvert is their superpower, because they are good in a situation of having more in-depth conversations with people that are substantial, with substance, to learn about the other person. And they like to be in smaller groups and have deeper conversations. Introverts like to observe, and they're very good listeners. And all of those skills make excellent networkers. Extroverts tend to be social butterflies, and it appears that they're doing lots. But then I would look at going, what's the quality of the conversation? Have they actually learned anything about the people and how they can help others? And the answer is not necessarily, because extroverts need sometimes to dial it back a little bit. And for me, one of the things I would say, introverts, we are all in our own head. We like to process in our own head. Extroverts, and when we're out at networking events, it takes our energy. So you talked about networking fatigue. Networking reduces our energy, which is why it's so important to manage it before and afterwards, and be very cognizant of how your energy flows. So if you're going to a conference for 2 or 3 days, for example, and doing something, one of the things I used to do is, if I was staying in a hotel, I would always order a room service for breakfast, because I did not want to go down and talk to people at breakfast time, because I knew I was already going to be tired during the day. So I would do little things like that. I would look at what events I would go to in the evening, and whether there was enough bandwidth for me to be able to do evening events if I knew I had a very heavy day the following day. So it's looking at what works for you and not comparing yourself to other people. Different people have different energies.
We have first question, and it's related to your previous thought, and it's really important, because I had the same struggle and I still have it. So being an introvert is not always about being shy. Introverts just often prefer deep relations over small talking. The real challenge for introverts is that they feel more comfortable when strong connections are already established, and they often find energy consuming activities such as finding the right people and building new relations. So what we can suggest here, because it's really very, very tricky when you enter in the room, it's already full of people and they're talking to each other, and you literally know no one there, and you, oh my god, I need what should I do? But I don't know, it's important for you or your business. So yesterday I had the same issue. The evening after the conference was evening event, and I was thinking, okay, I've done my conference event, I will just skip it. But I started it, I just find it the nearest table and ask a very stupid question: don't you mind if I join you? And I start to ask people questions, what they're doing, and this helped me to overcome my internal, this imposter syndrome. So what, on your experience, work here when you prefer more meaningful connections, but when you start relations, it's about small talk mostly? So what is the balance, or what we can suggest here?
Okay, so I think in a situation like that, the first thing, when you're going into a big room, and I know this, having gone to many functions, going to many rooms, is in a previous life in corporate, no matter what I was doing in the day, sometimes I get to the door and I would nearly get paralyzed. It would be nearly like somebody punched me in the stomach. I would just go I nearly freeze, and I would have to go to the bathroom to touch up lipstick that didn't need to be touched up, and just go to the bath. I literally would be paralyzed. So I absolutely get all of this, but this is where I say it comes down to the preparation. Arrive early, and part of your preparation is, what are you going to wear? What way are you going to put your hair? What shoes are you going to wear? Where are you going to park? What I talk about is, how many decisions can you make in advance of showing up that reduce the friction? Because if you have already made lots of decisions in advance of showing up, then they are not things you have to think about when you're on site. The less you have to think about on site about small decisions, and you take away that friction, the more energy and more presence you bring to when you show up in that very, very moment. What I would say then is, arrive early. Because when you're in the room and you can set yourself up and you put your coat away or go to the coffee station, whatever that might look like, you can then calm your nerves. If you're a bit nervous, you can understand the lay of the land, where the bathrooms are. You can go and talk to the host. What I would say in advance as well is set your goals for what you want to get out of an event. This comes down to the preparation. The majority of people do not set goals for the events. But the thing in any business, if you don't set goals, how do you know when you succeed? So if you're an introvert, don't try and meet everybody. That is absolute nonsense, absolute nonsense. You will drain your energy. You will not do yourself justice. So the thing then is going, who do I need to meet? How do I get strategic about the conversations I'm having? There's a few ways you can do that. If the organizers will share the list, which under GDPR, that's not always possible. But if you can get a list of who's there, there might be names, connections that you would like to make. Ask the host, the chair, say, hey, I'm new to this. This is the type of person I would like to go and talk to. Could you facilitate a couple of introductions for me? You might look at the list and say, I would like these introductions. Would you introduce me to XYZ person? And you can take ownership of what is happening, rather than going into a room going, I'm just going to see what happens. You've set your plan, you've set your mindset, you've worked out who you want to talk to, why you want to talk to them, what you're going to say when you have that opportunity to talk to them, and you develop those conversations. But if you're going to an event for an hour, if you're an introvert, and especially if you're starting, you might say, listen, if I have one or two good conversations and make one or two good connections, that is a successful event. Extroverts can sometimes do more because they have more energy to do it. But for extroverts, I would say is, don't be the social butterfly. Concentrate on maybe having 4 or 5 decent conversations at the networking meeting. If you're an introvert and you're talking to an extrovert, be aware of the two different energies. Introverts need to raise the energy a little bit. It's not matching it, because we're never going to match, but it's raising it to give a little bit more of yourself, because introverts, we can come across as quite reticent and sometimes a little bit bristly and a little bit cold. And, we can come across, and it's not because we are, it's just because sometimes we're enveloped in the fear or the deer in the headlights, or we're just paralyzed and people don't see what's going on. They just say, oh, well, she doesn't want to talk to anybody, that doesn't look very friendly. But it's because we're all in our own.
Absolutely. Yeah, and a couple of outcomes here regarding the question from chat. Just to sum up, first set, when you do the small preparations, when I'm going to park, what I should wear, you're like taking a control over a situation. So you have less energy to spend on site to make this decision making, but you're also taking control of the situation. It's very important for our brain, because we start to feel a little bit safer about the situation. Okay, I can handle it because I handle it. And it's very important. And the second thought here is also, when you're talking to an organizer or chair or someone, it also always puts you in a position, because other people see, okay, they're communicating with organizers, and they may even to communicate with you, which for introverts is much preferable than you just, make this cold content. And the third outcome here, that smaller events could be a very good, meetups, very good start for introverts, because less people in the room, they're more open, more friendly. Or if it's some kind of, round table discussion, you're participating in a workshop or whatever, when you can start to communicate on purpose. Because for introverts, it's always very hard. Okay, I need to find something to ask. And if you have not done your homework, or the list of attendance wasn't available because of GDPR or any kind of other issue. So smaller events could be, with very good workout for you, or gym, to start to train yourself actually to talk to people, to network to people. And afterwards, it would be maybe much easier to go for some kind of huge event, with a lot of booths, when everyone can feel lost.
Yeah, I think, the more you do it, the more comfortable you will get. But it took me years of doing it and doing it badly to learn all of the lessons. And that's part of what I speak and train about, is it's everything I've learned through the corporate career, through being an SME, and then setting up my own businesses. And my focus and impact is to help people succeed, because what I know, when people grow their confidence, and a lot of people will think that networking is just about going into the event and handing a business card. And for me, I'm going, no, networking makes builds your confidence. And with confidence, that's when you flourish. That's when you tap in and unleash your potential. Confidence is a skill. It isn't something we just have, but the more we develop it, the more we learn, the more self-aware we become. When we become self-aware, and here's the thing, then we can self-advocate. And as business owners or career professionals, we have to learn to self-advocate. So we have to learn what we stand for. If we don't understand those values and we can't self-advocate, how do we create a community of people who can advocate for us by virtue of a referral or a connection to here's somebody who's going to invest in your company or who's going to support you in financing or somebody who might be a board or a mentor or coach? How do people make connections if we don't know how to show up? And my perspective, I suppose, and what I've learned is that by me becoming confident, growing my confidence, not only opened all of these doors for me to look at what I could do differently, what more could I bring to the world, what impact could I have, but I know I would never have seen the world I see now had I not worked on my confidence. And what I would love to help other people do is to understand that by learning to network, you tap in to your superpower. If you're an introvert, you tap into a superpower. And when you have that power to connect with yourself, with other people, and remember why the confidence is so important. If we don't feel confident in ourselves, how do we get other people to be confident in us? And that's hugely important in how we show up. It shows up in our language, our body language, how we shake hands with people. And again, back down to reducing
processes before we understood it. I mean, it's something.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is all stuff that I would also put into the prep. What do you need to do in advance? If you are starting networking, what I would say is have all of the information that you need, where you're going to be, how long it's going to take, where you're going to park, all of that stuff. That just means the decisions are made. You're not caught with a curveball. But visualize yourself walking into the room. Visualize yourself smiling, and that's really key. A lot of people, when they're nervous, they forget to smile. So all you see is a frown and smile. Well, because they're so worried. But all you're saying is you're not confident in yourself. So what if you were to look at it a little bit differently, going, right, I'm going to walk into this room. I'm going to go into the bathroom. I'm going to shake myself off. I'm going to step into my courage, step into my confidence. And when I go across the door into the meeting room or the event, whatever that looks like, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to be smiling, because when I'm smiling, my body language relaxes and I become approachable and I am seen as approachable, and that people will come to me. I think from there then as well, it is looking at how, visualizing how you're shaking hands with people, that you're very comfortable, you're having nice conversations with people, you're smiling, you're interacting with people. Practicing how you shake hands. When we don't shake hands properly, we say we don't trust ourselves. If we don't trust ourselves, how do we get other people to trust us? So for me, then when I explain it all like this, it's about how we show up as humans. It's so much more than going to an event and handing out a business card. It is everything about the impact and value we bring to the world.
And here we have a next question. It's related to, the power of first impression. So is it really important how you look during this first impression? Because you're talking a lot about smiling, physiognomics. I mean, everything related not to appearance itself. I mean, am I blonde or am I white skin, black skin, or whomever I look like? But it's related from energy. But does appearance really matters? I mean, or more matters your human qualities, like you're open, you're energized, you're smiling. So, or this first impression is not so powerful and we tend to think about it?
I think it's really important, and I think our first impressions last. They do, because our first, you could be wearing a pair of jeans and a pair of flip-flops, but if you are super, super confident, that is what people will see. So it really depends. Confidence is the most attractive thing of all. And that can overpower everything else and override everything else. But I think showing up matters, because regardless of regardless of anything, we all have a personal and a professional brand. And what that means is, what do people say about us when we're not in the room? If they were going to introduce us, how would they, excuse me, got a frog in my throat. How would they introduce us? Do we align with their values? Do we make them look good? And for people to make introductions, we have to think about all of these things. How are we showing up? You know, when people shake, I focus a little bit on, and I've done a blog on it, around shaking hands, for example, how important it is that there's a correct way of shaking hands and there's an incorrect way of shaking hands. Well, there's many incorrect ways of shaking hands. But it's so important because the first thing it says that if you do it well or don't do it well is, do you trust yourself? And how we show up, and that is part of the brand, is how are we showing up? What impression do we want to make, and to whom do we want to make it? And what I would love people to understand, and what I certainly understand, is what is the game you want to play? What is the arena you want to play in? What do those people expect of you? So if you're starting, your mindset is here. But the thing about business success is not about technical ability. 80% of business success is how you manage your mind. So how are you showing up? How do the people that you want to liaise with, collaborate with, get as investors or stakeholders or boards, whatever that looks like, what do they expect of you?
So it's mostly first impression. It's not about what you wear. I mean, like brands or whatever. I mean, obviously, it should be relevant to the like network itself. I mean, or to the event. So you can't wear a wedding dress to a business conference. It would be hardly to understand for other people. But it's not about what you wear. It's about mostly how you wear. I mean, so how you feel. Are you confident enough? Is it real confidence, or it's a fake it until you make it? It's mostly about this thing, as far as I understood. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of people will sort of talk about fake it till you make it. I heard a nice one yesterday. I was on a mastermind, and one of the ladies said, "Faith it till you make it." So I thought that was a nice way of thinking about it.
It's a good one.
Yeah. So, but the way I would sort of look at it, and I would talk to, is act as if. So what is the world? Where do you want to be playing? Who are the relationships you need to have to make things happen? Because here's the thing in life, there's nobody, not one of us, that is supposed to have all of the answers. But when we're afraid and when we don't have connections and we don't know or aren't self-aware, what happens, and I know this was my journey, was I thought I had to have all of the answers. So that manifested in imposter syndrome, which manifested in nobody was getting in. But what I learned through networking was I built a community, and when I have a question, I have people that I can ask questions to, that when life happens, I have support there. And that's really important, because nobody, and just in case that wasn't clear, nobody does anything on their own. Anybody who is successful has done and created success by building relationships with people who could help them along their journey. And we all need different people. They say people come into our lives for a reason, a season, or for life. So who do you need in your life? What does that look like? And you can plan it out. You can work out what the gaps are. So you need your mentors, you need your coaches, you need your business besties, you need to have your super connectors in your networks. And that's actually a good point as well to reference. When you go to a new network or you get involved in a different network, there's always some people who know lots of people. And if you were to make a filter, focus or find out who are the people who know lots of people, go and start building the relationships there, because then when you need to connect, you can go to them. You've already built a relationship up with them, so they know who you are, what you're about. And when you say, listen, I'm looking for somebody because I've got this challenge or I've got this question, who could you connect me in with? And that shortens your ability to make connections and build up your own community and own network. But as with anything, there's lots of people who will say, I'll start tomorrow. Tomorrow never comes. I'll start in 6 months because, you know, schools are closing and summer holidays and kids will be back to school, and excuses. There's not one excuse that people could give me that I won't bat out of the park, because I know from experience that it comes down to fear. So people tell me, well, I've got young children. I'm going, yes, I have 3 young children. I still network. I was crippled with cancer treatments last year. I still networked. There's always a way of doing something, or you can create an excuse. But the people who win are the people who are making connections and learning what it's going to take for them to step up. And within all of that, they elevate their mindset, they elevate their connections, elevate their community, elevate what is possible. And that to me is so satisfying when I see people develop and understand the impact networking will have. And then I bring it back to, it is so much more than walking into a room and handing out a business card. It's all about you and your humanity.
And we have one last question. I think it will be very powerful ending for our discussion. So on your experience, what helps you personally, for example, to recharge your battery?
So not talking to anybody is my absolute favorite. So particularly, people, even my kids, my youngest kid is, I would say, Ireland's biggest extrovert. She fascinates me because I actually don't know how I made her, because she's quite literally the polar opposite to me. She wakes up in the morning and she's chatter, and I get to a stage going, please stop talking. I love you, please stop talking. It's exhausting. So I have to step out and create space. So sometimes I might be going for a walk, or if I'm in an event, I get into the car. Sometimes I might listen to the podcast. Sometimes I have nothing on in the car and it's just silence because I'm processing. I need time just to get my thoughts together. And one thing I want to, I already said that networking for introverts, it's an absolute superpower. You just need to learn how to network. And as I said, it's a skill. It's something you can learn. Be compassionate with yourself as you are learning it. But what I'd like to finish on is that if we think of Beyonce, Darwin, Einstein, Obama, Elon Musk, all introverts. People who change the world.
A lot of great people in the world,
Introverts. And it's not that it's a right or wrong, it's introverts think differently, they process information differently. And that was I only discovered I was an introvert 3 years ago. And it was such a game-changing piece of information for me that I literally was going, why didn't somebody tell me this a long time ago? So why didn't somebody introduce this concept to me when I started out in my career? Because it would have made life so much easier. I spent most of my career thinking I was less than because I worked in an extroverted industry and I couldn't perform the way extroverts performed. And I thought there was something wrong with me. I felt less than. I struggled immensely, which nobody ever saw or would have known, and I would never have thought I could have shared that information. But now, when I found, I don't even know how I found out I was an introvert, but it was just this light bulb went off, and I was like, oh, why didn't somebody share this with me? And when I went in and started investigating, I was going, okay, that's why I show up like that. That's why I'm exhausted. That's what I need to do about it. My journey since then has been, how do I manage this better? And then obviously transfer that knowledge to other people. Say, being an introvert is epic. You just have to learn what it looks like for you and run your own race.
Yeah, there is a very great book about introverts. I call it Introverts for Dummies. It's called Quiet, and it's got white cover with white letters on top. And when I read it, I understand, okay, I'm fine. I'm just different to other people, and it's okay to be different. And It was a game changer for me as well. So I just started to accept my vulnerabilities, and not as something I need to cure, but something, okay, I'm operating like this. It's my operational system. It's like iPhone, and there's Android.
Exactly.
And they're different and so beautiful. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jean, and everyone for having such many questions, because we already got out of our timing, but discussion was so energetic, and I think it was very insightful. For me personally, I have tons of quotes of yours. I encourage everyone to think at least one more time this podcast, because there is a lot of wisdom behind about how to treat yourself and how to become more confident, and it's extremely important skill we all need to learn by ourselves, teach our kids. So the discussion is much broader than about networking. It's about I think well-being in business. So thank you so much, Jean, for sharing your wisdom, for being such a vulnerable and honest with us with so much experience and examples. It was my pleasure to host you today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. And if anyone, I have a free podcast and a blog. So networkinggene.ie is the blog. If you prefer a written form, or if you like to listen, I have the Network Me podcast. So I have a nice one on investors. Pete Townsend did a nice one on investment. And there's lots of different ones there. So depending on how people consume information, and I do, as I said, on LinkedIn and social, I do Tuesday tip as well. So a little bit of micro learning about something I've observed that week, just to help people, move forward, and maybe it'll help.
Join Jean Network. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone who was watching us live or going to watch us a little bit later in record. And thank you, Jean, for your time and your knowledge. So start networking today. No excuses. We just need to find our own way in how to do it properly to boost our self-confidence. So thank you so much.
100%. Thanks, everyone.